In the midst of the great financial crisis, I went down to Atlanta with my roommate, visited his neighborhood, and his neighborhood was completely ravaged by foreclosures.
Ryan Williams was still a college student when he saw firsthand the impact of the 2008 housing crash.
And so there was the idea and the opportunity right there. I said, well, what if we could start buying some of these homes? They're neighborhoods we know, they're people and communities that may have been prone to subprime predatory lending. Let's give them a second shot at, the American dream, and raised money from some classmates, bought a few homes, rented them back out to people in the community, and ended up selling back one of the homes to one of the previous owners, made 3 times our money.
Wow.
And from there, my passion for real estate really blossomed.
Ryan saw a way to help the community and gain experience as an investor. This week, he shares how he founded a company to take on entrenched competition in the real estate market, what he learned when that business was swept into the spotlight, and why he eventually decided to exit.
This is Masters of Scale.
I'm Jeff Berman, your host. Ryan founded Cadre in 2014. It's a tech-powered commercial real estate investment platform, and that may not sound like the most exciting thing you've ever heard about, but he sold the business recently. It's a sweat-driven story of an entrepreneur who started way back when he was a teenager. Ryan, welcome to Masters of Scale.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great to have you here. Like a lot of our guests, you started your entrepreneurial journey early. Can you tell us about your first forays into being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. My my earliest days were in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is where I was born. And Baton Rouge is a city that's divided, and historically has been divided, physically and economically. But despite those divisions, what I saw at least was opportunity, and a lot of people who were making the best out of challenging situations. And so when I think about entrepreneurship, that's sort of the lens that I always saw the world through, which is there's always going to be barriers, there's always going to be challenges ahead of you. But I saw so many examples of people prospering despite that adversity and figuring out creative ways to address some of the challenging circumstances they were in. And so for me, entrepreneurship is really a state of mind. I had so many endeavors that didn't work out.
What were some of those?
I actually tried to start a local sort of bait and tackle shop up, selling worms to people in certain parts of Baton Rouge. That didn't work out, largely because no one knew who this little kid was trying to sell this kind of product. So the first real venture was my personalized sports apparel business, where I was selling these custom headbands and wristbands. And again, born out of a pain point, couldn't afford the Nike or the Adidas or the Jordan headbands and wristbands.
How old are you when you do this?
I was 13.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I went to local wholesale garment district area similar to what we have in the city, and I bought these terry cloth headbands and wristbands for $1, $2 a pop. And initially they were just for me because I wanted to have some kind of design or logos that looked somewhat like the Nikes of the day. But then teammates said, "Where'd you get these?" And I obviously didn't let them know what my connection was, but I told them I could provide same kind of access to them and, maybe charge a little bit of a markup. And that's what I did, and actually made decent money, hundreds of dollars. But it showed me that there was a market here. And the next question became, how do you differentiate this before somebody does hear about where you actually bought these headbands and wristbands? And so the idea I came up with was customization. At that time, there was so many things apparel-wise being personalized. I found a local embroiderer, decided to start customizing these headbands and wristbands. I'd ask, what's your favorite, slogan or your team name or your number? Reach out to my embroiderer, within 24 hours, have a custom embroidered headband or wristband. And I actually started really growing the business throughout the state and throughout the region, and caught the eyes of a nonprofit called the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship, or NFTE, which is based out here in New York. They said, we heard about this business you have. Would you be interested in applying to our national business plan competition? You can win a grant, you can come to New York City. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so I put a business plan together the best that I could. I remember it was like a 3-panel, one of those science research presentations where you have 3 panels, and I showed a product before, after my embroidery, and some of the happy customers, most of which were my family.
And did you go on Google to figure out how to do a business plan?
I must probably Alta Vista, whatever the search engine was at the time.
Yeah.
And I brought the only suit I had, which was the suit I wore to church. And they flew me to New York City, competed actually down in the financial district. And I was shocked when I got there. I was very, very young at the time. I was competing against kids in college who had business plans, who were at Ivy League schools, and some who had graduated, which I had no idea about. Had I known, maybe I would have stayed in Louisiana. But ended up going through the pitch, the presentation, won first place, best use of technology, won a $10,000 grant. And most important for me was I got access to mentors, many of whom were based out of New York, who saw more in me than I saw in myself. And it was their urging that led me to take that next big step in my life journey, which was to think beyond what I was exposed to, and think beyond the four corners of my current imagination, and apply to Harvard, which was a huge inflection point, first one in my family to go to any kind of college like that. And so I applied, I was accepted, and was able to attend Harvard. And from there, things really took off for me.
Yeah. So let's talk about Cadre. First, just if you could explain in simple terms,
Yes.
what is Cadre?
Yeah, Cadre is a technology-driven real estate investment platform. I started the business to democratize access to real estate and ultimately alternative investments. And, it's a platform where people can log in, they can invest in either single real estate properties or in portfolios that our team curates for them. And the idea behind Cadre came to me after spending time sitting at some of the most well-known institutions, Blackstone and Goldman Sachs, seeing how much money and wealth was being created, but for a relatively small part of our global economy. And going back to, again, that questioning of, why is this the way of the world? Why can only the 1% of the 1% benefit from access to alternatives? And so I decided to build a business that would be akin to a Blackstone, but with the tech stack behind it for the masses.
And so just so our audience understands, and so I understand, yes. It's a platform so that if you're an investor who can't afford a $20 million building or $100 million building, whatever, you can actually do fractional ownership, similar to buying into the stock of a company.
Exactly.
Fractional ownership.
One of the companies that was, they had arrived a couple years before us, but that I spent a lot of time with early on was Robinhood. And so in many ways, Robinhood was able to do in the equities market, we aspired to do in the alternative space as well.
Yeah. And so the origin of the idea, I appreciate the inspiration and being able to see at Blackstone and Goldman how much wealth is created for the, 1/100th of 1%.
Yes.
But why real estate? Why this direction? What was the spark of inspiration for you on this?
So to know why real estate, got to go back to those college years, which were by far, the most impactful for me for a lot of reasons. It wasn't just a culture change, it was a culture shock, but it was a playground of resources going to Harvard. And, I got there and I said, I want to take advantage of all these incredibly talented people, amazing resources, network, et cetera. And when I realized that there really wasn't, a curriculum or playbook if you wanted to go deep in business, so to speak. And so financial services like venture capital, private equity, and I started doing a ton of research on those spaces, realizing I wasn't going to learn it in class. And I built a curriculum, which initially with notes that I took for myself, just to get smart in this space. And what I recognized quickly was that there really wasn't a way for undergraduates, especially those who didn't come from the finance world, to get smart on business, so to speak, or to get smart in these spaces. And real estate really resonated with me because one, the state I'm from is a state that's known for having very systemic real estate issues, given New Orleans is under sea level, and real estate's always been a sector in a space that's had a lot of adversity. And the like, I never owned real estate, my family didn't growing up, but it was always around me. And so I had a curiosity about it. And so the more time I spent learning about it, the more I realized that it was the most important asset class to own to build long-term wealth. Yet very few people were able to actually own it, especially people such as myself. And so it was a curiosity. I built a curriculum. I recruited some Harvard Business School professors to teach the curriculum, which again, in hindsight, was crazy.
Just to be clear, you are a freshman at Harvard. Yep. This is a very much a fish out of water in terms of this is all very new for me. I'm not seeing the things that I want to learn. So I'm going to do the research myself, develop a curriculum, and then I'm going to just show up and hang out outside the door of the Harvard Business School professors until I find one who says, I like it, yes.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Wow.
Fearlessness. And you know, it's interesting because, again, it goes back to what my grandfather said, what's the worst thing that can happen? People say no. And a lot of people did say no. But, you know, I'd been in the entrepreneurial world. I was used to being rejected.
Right. People said no to your worms at the bait and tackle shop.
And they said no to almost every other concept that I had thought of. And it takes, you know, as an entrepreneur, a really, really strong will, you know, to continue to go forward when you get rejected. Most things in life, you know, you get told 99 times out of 100, no, you're figuring out a different path or course. And so I knew all I needed was 2 to 3 professors who would say, yes, we believe in this, we believe in this concept, and we think others should be able to learn some of these concepts so that they can go off to real estate careers or VC careers, or whatever the case may be, and have the same opportunities that people who come from that network.
So this was the kernel of the idea for Cadre?
This was the kernel of my passion in real estate.
Gotcha.
So this was where I found and I learned how lucrative real estate could be. There's a professor named Arthur Siegel, who was a renowned HBS professor in real estate, who taught the real estate curriculum I developed. And I'd spend time with him after class, and he would always say, Ryan, the best way to get into real estate is to get into real estate. And, you know, and it's nice to have the theory, it's nice to understand, you know, cap rates and all the concepts. But you're not really immersed in it until you actually are investing or in owning or a part of a real estate firm. And so that just stuck with me, you know, and you know, I was like, I'd love to figure out how to get involved. The next year was the great financial crisis. And so, you know, I believe that luck, timing is everything. And, you know, that period of time presented a lot of challenges for so many people, but also opportunity.
Yeah.
And so in the midst of the great financial crisis, I went down to Atlanta with my roommate, visited his neighborhood, and his neighborhood was completely ravaged by foreclosures and
full of subprime.
Yeah. I mean, Georgia had the most bank failures out of any state, which we later learned. And you know, his own home was up for being foreclosed on, had gone through the short sale process. And so there was the idea and the opportunity right there. I said, well, what if we could start buying some of these homes? They're neighborhoods we know, you know, they're people and communities that, you know, have had, you know, a hard go at life in a lot of ways and may have been prone to subprime predatory lending. Let's give them a second shot at, you know, the American dream, and raised money from some classmates, bought a few homes, rented them back out to people in the community, and ended up selling back one of the homes to one of the previous owners, made 3 times our money.
Wow.
And from there, you know, my passion for real estate really blossomed. And so that was where I saw how powerful ownership of real estate could be in helping shape people's futures. And so that passion obviously grew. We started buying more homes, thousands of units we acquired. Now, this was sort of my night job. My day job was working in finance to pay off my student loans. And I got to a point where I had enough belief and conviction in, you know, the understanding of real estate to say, you know what, now it's time to take the next step in my journey.
What was that inflection point? Was there a moment where you said, okay, I've got enough confidence, I'm far enough along where I can leave finance and go do this?
After my first year at Blackstone,
Yeah.
In their real estate private equity group, I saw what they were doing at a completely different scale than what I was doing. We were buying thousands of homes, you know, on a weekly basis. I was buying, you know, 1 or 2 maybe on a quarterly basis. And so I was like, you know, there's no way I'm going to catch up to where Blackstone is on my own in a standalone basis. I didn't necessarily have the same level of belief that the investing that we were doing was going to accrue to the benefit of the community. In the same way that if I were to have invested in a community, I know I would care about both doing well and doing good.
For a lot of people in this situation who, I mean, have made it to Harvard, have made it to Blackstone.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing pretty well right here.
Sure.
And you've got this drive and you've got this idea. They might say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to do this at Blackstone. I've got the security of Blackstone behind me. Like, what gave you the confidence and the impetus to say, I'm out? Like, I'm going to go do this on my own and not do this here.
I decided that, you know, I'd done well enough financially. I wasn't going to optimize just for the next dollar. And instead, I wanted to have an impact. And also, I thought a lot about, you know, if I didn't go out and build this kind of business, you know, I'd regret it down the line, number one. But number two, someone who may not have the same goals and mission, in terms of promoting self-determination amongst the underserved, which is kind of like my founding, principle. And I always said, like, in order to get unconventional outcomes, you have to do unconventional things.
So you're at Blackstone, you see this opportunity, and what are the steps you have to take to actually jump and start? You got to raise money, you need a tech stack. Like, what do you do?
I understood technology. The next step for me was to figure out, how do I build an MVP? How do I build a product where it's easy for people to log in and invest in real estate projects? So my second year at Blackstone, for the most part, I was focused on everything I needed to be doing by the day. By night, I was building out my business plan and building out the first version of the product in an MVP.
And so, did you have a technical co-founder? Are you coding?
I don't want to hype up, how dynamic it was, but they were very immersive, dynamic wireframes. But yeah, the first version of the product and the platform I built, the first actual asset was an asset that I was able to secure vis-a-vis a relationship with Jared Kushner, who was one of my earliest partners as well. And then the investor base, those who were buying fractional stakes from my network, and then from friends and family who I'd gotten to know as well over years. So we kind of built proof of concept, pretty much the second half of my time at Blackstone. And it was really that experience that gave me the confidence that, this was a workable product. There was demand because we were able to raise a significant amount of money relatively quickly for the first deal. When I shared the idea with the powers that be at Blackstone, it was clear that it was not going to be something they were interested in pursuing in-house.
Why did they say no?
Innovator's dilemma. It's like this, if you think about what premise of the platform was that I built, it was about broadening access to more than the sovereign wealth funds of the world, which is a little threatening. It was about providing more transparency. Mm-hmm. So letting people see, these stakes of buildings, and just like in a stock, you can see performance, being able to buy into some of these interests. And it was about providing liquidity, which hadn't existed in real estate today, because my view was most individuals don't just have thousands of dollars sitting around that they can afford to be tied up. And so what we did was we created an early version of the first ever secondary market for real estate. So I think that there were enough conflicting dynamics associated with this concept, because we were trying to build what I believe would be, an evolutionary form of investment management. At the time too, this idea of technology, which is hard to believe because this was 2014, but the idea of technology changing real estate was still crazy to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Prop tech, fintech, these were still, slogans and phrases that people sort of laughed at, And so in a lot of ways we were very early, which is probably one of the reasons why, the folks at Blackstone were supportive that I was not going to a competitor and instead, was taking this moonshot. But I think in a lot of ways it was eating at some of the core principles of the business at the time.
I wanted to hear more about how Ryan built Cadre's client base. He had a much more complex offering to market than, say, a consumer product.
It's a great point. And the B2B, which is really what I think we are more of in the B2B2C business as well. It's a very different playbook, especially when the underlying industry is one that is used to everything being analog, offline, relationship based. And so my approach to scaling the business was a little counterintuitive, which was start at the top of the kind of customer pyramid, if you will, like with the most sophisticated, discerning, analog, offline potential partners, but also the ones that have the most gravitas and the most trust.
What's an example?
Goldman Sachs.
And good example.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, you think of Goldman, you think of this behemoth, and you think of this institution that, is relatively slow moving in the scheme of technology companies. You think of, a lot of domain understanding and expertise in investing. And what I wanted to do is build a moat around some of these highly sophisticated partners from a distribution standpoint, get them to buy into the concept, get them to distribute our product to their clients. And from there, I thought you could then go down the kind of customer pyramid, if you will, to much a wider range of investors that maybe didn't have all the quote unquote sophistication, all the infrastructure that someone like Goldman had, but would look at Goldman as a social proof point.
Right.
And so that meant the sales cycles for getting some of these partners to bring their clients onto our platform to invest were much, much longer. So as an investor, VC, you've got to be willing, to understand that this is more of a marathon, a fast marathon. It's not a sprint. And the rewards from a lot of that investment early on in building, an infrastructure that is trusted, credible, that has all the safeguards you would want in place, that's a well-curated platform, will pay dividends down the line. And so after a lot of conversations with folks like Goldman and JP Morgan and Ford Foundation, some of these bigger institutional clients, we ended up winning a few contracts, and we were able to strike some partnerships, less than 2 years since I started the business, with some of the biggest names in the financial services world. And once we've got those investors to say, you know what, this is a really unique way to give our clients access to real estate at smaller fractional bite sizes with liquidity, then being able to go to independent advisors and direct to individuals became infinitely easier. But the muscle that at least we had to be able to build was, we needed to have a really clear playbook for these longer sales cycle meetings and engagements, where we knew what meeting one was going to need to look like to hook these investors on the concept of what we were looking to do, the value proposition. We knew that we were going to need to meet them in person, because it was very much relationship business. We had one shot at technology demos and giving them a view into what this would entail, because there was already skepticism. And then there's an ongoing client relations management side of this as well, where we had to bring on domain experts who could cultivate those relationships. And so we spent the first few years building a highly concentrated base of significant whales, if you will. I like to use a fish and whales analogy.
Sure. Yeah.
And we were able to get those investors to say, yes, we believe in this business, we believe in the product. And it really differentiated the brand. It gave us a unique brand equity amongst the space that had become increasingly crowded. And it was also great from a revenue perspective, because these were bigger, forward contracts that we were able to lock in with more transactions.
And were the Goldmans committing minimum dollars to be invested as part of these deals, and then they were passing on the opportunity to their clients, and they just knew that they could fill up to that number based on
Yeah. So what we did with Goldman, which as far as I know hasn't been replicated, we secured a $250 million commitment from Goldman, the institution.
Yep.
And then they had about 1,000 sub-advisors and clients beneath that commitment. And those were the individuals that ultimately owned fractional stakes in the properties or the portfolios that we built for them.
Right.
And so I would say, it was really building that critical mass of high impact, large enterprise-like clients that gave us the ability to then open up access, to a wider range of folks from a position of trust.
One of the most unexpected challenges Cadre faced was around media attention it received during the first Trump term, because one of its earliest investors was Jared Kushner, who suddenly had a role in the White House, which might have created conflicts of interest.
Yeah, we got a lot of attention. And I guess taking a step back, if you think about the time frame when Cadre was being incubated, if you will, and started 2013, 2014, world was very different.
Very different.
In a lot of ways.
Yep.
It was really both brothers that I had got to know, and had gotten to know, frankly, even before Cadre. Josh and I were in school together. He's a couple years ahead of me. And Jared had been really supportive in one of my real estate businesses, and also on a personal level. And so I got to know them in a very different context, and the world has seemingly gotten to know them. When I was working with them, they were still relatively early in their careers, And so when I was thinking about partners and thinking about the kind of people I want to work with, those two off the bat checked every box. And so my experience with them has been incredible. I never anticipated, the geopolitical focus on the business. And I always made it clear to Jared and to Josh that, I had certain principles and values, and, those values are for me, values I would never forsake, and I would never, concede on in any way, shape, or form. Respect, integrity, transparency, empathy. These are all things, that I was raised with, and in all my experiences and in times with them, there was a genuine respect for those values. We didn't always agree on everything.
Sure.
And I don't even think, Jared and Josh agree on everything. But, what we did agree on was we wanted to do what was best for Cadre and to move the business forward, because it was a company we all had a deep passion for. And so, it led to, everyone in a lot of different ways making selfless decisions. Jared extracting himself from the business when he went down to DC, when he had, brought so many of his relationships under the tent. Josh encouraging me, to find my voice and speak truth to power when there were things that I saw that I didn't agree with, especially in light of George Floyd's murder in 2020. I would say overall, like, our company and our team grew from that experience and from having so many politically connected partners, because it wasn't just Jared and Josh. We also had the Soros family, who was one of our biggest backstop partners, and Mark Cuban, who I communicated with on a weekly basis. So we had the whole full political spectrum, but Jared and Josh were there from the early days. And for me, my relationship with them preceded, all the kind of the media focus and the political involvement and engagement. And that's always how I tried to keep, our boundaries.
How did you deal with some of the negative attention that this has brought to you?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is I was very naive about the media world. But I learned pretty quickly that I was going to have to let some of the inbounds from the media remain inbounds. I was going to have to let some of the stories that, weren't validated or where I didn't, have the bandwidth or time to focus on, become stories. And, I probably in hindsight could have gotten ahead of some things earlier, but, you can spend all your time managing media and then, the business suffers. And so I had some incredible mentors who I went to whenever there was a story on the horizon.
Who were some of those mentors?
People like Vinod Khosla, who I would talk to. And Vinod was great in that he gave me this advice that still resonates with me today, which is the most important attribute in his mind of an entrepreneur is, who do you listen to for what advice? And that's a muscle as well, right? It takes time because early on, it's sort of a trial and error. You listen to one person who gave you certain advice on one concept or theme, and you realize it was not the right person to listen to. And so what I did was I built a I guess a little cadre, if you will, of advisors around me who I knew would be great, for certain challenges. And Vinod was super helpful as it related to managing the team and keeping everyone focused in-house while, there were media stories surrounding the business. I spoke and spent a lot of time with Michael Ovitz as well. And
who's seen his share of controversies he's had to deal with.
That's right. And Michael was great as well with, making sure I kept my head on straight, and I focused on the main thing, which was making sure our business continued to scale and achieve product market fit. And then I actually talked with Josh Kushner a lot as well too. And Josh, had a very unique perspective, obviously being in his seat, but was incredibly supportive throughout. I consider myself really fortunate that, despite all of the craziness that came with being a CEO and a founder, plus at that time, I had this network of people around who cared about me. One of the things I learned from that experience is you can never over communicate to your key stakeholders. Yeah. And so I had to get in front of it. I had to stand in front of the company and say, hey, tomorrow this is going to be something that's out. Here's the truth of the matter. Let's stay focused. I'm carving out 6 hours of my day for one-on-ones. If anybody wants to talk with me about, anything that's bothering them or they're excited about, I'm here for you. And that was like a leadership evolution that I had to develop.
And it sounds deeply consistent with your personal values, transparency, openness, right? And, you were creating opportunities for yourself to talk to the people you wanted to get to, and you're giving that opportunity to your team to say, I'm here.
Right.
The list of advisor names is just a who's who. Yeah. Is there a secret that you want to pass on to people about how to build that level of a set of advisors?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is that in hindsight, again, I consider myself really fortunate to have that network of folks. What I would say to people that want to build that kind of cohort of domain experts, it's got to be a symbiotic relationship. There has to be something you're bringing to the table. You can't come with your hands open every single time asking for something. So for me, as I thought about some of the investors, other than investing in the business, which is great, it was also keeping people close to certain themes and trends that I saw in real estate or alternatives, sharing with them insights that I saw that might be helpful for them on a personal basis or for their own portfolio. Sharing perspectives about other founders, that were emerging that I had gotten to know that I thought would be interesting for them to get to speak with. And then just making sure, you deliver on what you say you're going to do. So for me, it was following up with communications, whether those were weekly email updates on how the business was doing, asks that I had of people, but then also insights I wanted to share. It was just about being consistent and, ensuring you held yourself accountable as well in those dynamics. And then to the extent that you deliver on one of those engagements, it becomes like a snowball, and this person says, I really would love to connect you to this person and this person. And, before you know it, you've been able to build a really strong group around you. But I think so often people look at those dynamics as transactions in a lot of ways, because they're like, okay, what can I actually bring? And there's a lot, that, people can share that you might not necessarily think is valuable to hear, but, some of these folks who are in kind of high places actually enjoy learning about.
Yeah. So you mentioned landing the Cadre plane in a way that was successful for your investors and your stakeholders. Why did you decide to sell the company?
So it was one of the toughest decisions, I've ever had to make, certainly professionally. And it was challenging because I think that in so many ways, your identity can become inextricably linked with what you do in your profession. And for me, I saw that certainly happening over time. So when I started the business, the vision was democratizing alternative investments. Real estate was the beachhead product. The pandemic was sort of a shot in the arm in that it showed me the importance of diversity and diversification. And so the question for me was, how do I most efficiently diversify our business such that we have multiple business lines that can endure any market condition? So there are two paths that we could take. One was we could go out and we could raise additional capital to build other mini cadres, a credit and a private equity and, a farmland and infrastructure, or we could partner. And the building path in my mind was a much longer path. It was a more expensive path, just given where the markets were. And it was a less certain path in a lot of different ways. The partner path was really interesting because we had so many inbounds from large institutions that were interested in, what we were building and doing, and acquiring the business. And we had interest from other fintech and consumer tech platforms as well. And so what I wanted to optimize for was a partner that could allow us to diversify our product offerings as well as our distribution, and a partner that had mission alignment. Because yes, we could go work with, you name your big institution, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily a guarantee that why I started the business would be what they were.
You may be selling your soul along with your company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You probably are. And so fortunately for me, I had engaged with this company, Yield Street, many, many moons before. I'd gotten to know the founders really, really well. And we both had alignment on the mission. We both cared about broadening access to alternatives. They took a different approach. They focused much more on the retail investor base from the outset. They focused much more on sort of credit and debt-oriented products, but it was a perfect complement to what we offered as well. And so after spending some time with the founders, some mutual shareholders and investors, we agreed to combine forces, technically sell the business. And so I'm proud of the team who really led a lot of the blocking and tackling of getting what was a complicated transaction done in an environment where there really wasn't much M&A happening. I'm really grateful for all the investors that believed in me and had conviction despite, some saying stay the path, stay standalone. But it had been a decade, since I started Cadre. And, this was a really great way for for me to leave an impact, a mark, and ultimately fulfill the promise of why I founded the business.
So what's next?
So landed that plane. I'm just starting to think about takeoff for my next journey. But I can tell you this: it will be a company that is at the cross section of financial services and technology. And so I'm spending a lot of time now speaking with potential clients, customers, doing all the fun due diligence, as well as prospective investors in the business. I'm excited about applying the learnings. A lot of people are like, Ryan, aren't you going to take some downtime? And, it's actually somewhat therapeutic to be able to apply, the learnings from decisions I made that worked out and that didn't into what's to come next. And I want to focus on working with people that I share values with, that I care about, that have the same incentives, as I do in terms of, financial as well as mission, and build on what, I've been able to do. But I'm an entrepreneur through and through, and that's where I feel most fulfilled, that 0 to 1 phase. And I love to be in the midst of ambiguity and absorb it, and to me, that's the essence of entrepreneurship.
Well, we can't wait to have you back on to talk about the new thing.
Can't wait as well.
Great. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ryan's resilience and drive have already helped him scale one business from scratch. His story is a testament to the power of building and nurturing a network. When you sit in person with Ryan, you can feel this energy. He exudes it. You want to root for him. You believe in him. You're excited about whatever he's talking about. I can't wait to see what he does next, and hopefully have him back on Masters of Scale to talk about it. I'm Jeff Berman. Thank you for listening.